Think about what you would eat if you were locked inside a wooden boat with no way out. No grocery store, no refrigerator, no fishing rod, no way to hunt. Just a floating wooden structure, the sound of rain above you, every animal species on Earth living somewhere below deck, and whatever food you had the foresight to load before the water rose. That was Noah's situation for at minimum 40 days. And if you follow the full Genesis account, the ark didn't touch ground for over a year. Now here's what's strange. For thousands of years, almost nobody asked the obvious question. What was Noah actually eating during that time? Because when you trace the answer back through the original text and cross-reference it with what modern nutritional science has learned in the last 50 years, you land somewhere you don't expect. The diet Noah was forced into, the one he had absolutely no choice about, aligns almost perfectly with what longevity researchers have spent decades trying to get modern humans to eat. Not by design, not by divine nutrition wisdom, by necessity. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what he was eating, why it works at a biological level, and what happened to human lifespans the moment that diet changed after the flood. That last part is the piece most people have never connected, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the assumption almost everyone makes. When most people picture Noah on the ark, they see him surrounded by every animal on Earth and assume he had unlimited access to meat. It's the obvious conclusion. You're floating with the world's most complete livestock collection. Surely he's eating well. Here's why that's wrong. God's instruction to Noah when he loaded the ark was specific. Every creature came in pairs, male and female, for a single purpose: repopulation. Every animal on that ark was the last breeding pair of its species on Earth. Every single one. Killing one for a meal wasn't just wasteful. It was potentially erasing that animal's entire lineage from the face of the earth forever. Noah understood what he was carrying. He didn't touch them. So what did he actually have? Genesis 6:21 answers this directly. God told Noah, "Take with you every kind of food that is to be eaten, and store it away as food for you and for them." The Hebrew word used is okel, stored provisions, pre-prepared, preserved, not fresh, not hunted, stored. Now think carefully about what food storage looked like before refrigeration existed. What could a pre-modern civilization actually preserve for a long, uncertain voyage with no resupply? Dried whole grains, legumes, lentils, chickpeas, dried beans, nuts and seeds, dried fruits, figs, dates, raisins, possibly fermented preparations because fermentation was one of the only reliable preservation methods available. Olive oil, which stays stable for months without refrigeration. Honey, which has an effectively infinite shelf life. What is not on that list? Fresh meat. Dairy in any meaningful quantity. The animals were stressed, displaced, newly boarded, and not producing. What Noah was eating for months inside that ark was structurally a whole food, plant-centered diet built around the most calorie-dense, shelf-stable foods that pre-modern humans knew how to store. And here is where modern nutritional science walks in and says something that should make you pause. In 2016, researchers at Harvard published one of the largest nutritional studies ever conducted. 130,000 participants, 36 years of follow-up data. They tracked what happened when people systematically replaced animal protein with plant protein, specifically legumes and whole grains. The results across every major mortality category, cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic syndrome, showed significant reduction. 130,000 people, 36 years. Harvard. The dietary pattern that kept emerging as most protective in that data looks almost structurally identical to what Noah had no choice but to eat. Now look at the blue zones. These are the 5 regions on Earth where people live past 100 at rates that defy global averages. Sardinia, Okinawa, Loma Linda, Nicoya, and Ikaria. Researchers expected significant variation between them. Different climates, different cultures, different food systems. And there is variation. But one pattern shows up in all 5 without exception. Legumes, eaten every single day. Lentils in the Mediterranean. Soybeans in Okinawa. Black beans in Costa Rica. Chickpeas across the board. The single most consistent dietary marker of extreme human longevity is the daily consumption of legumes. Not red wine, not olive oil. Legumes. The same food that would have been the cornerstone of Noah's storage hold. And when you understand what legumes actually do to the human body, the pattern starts to make sense. They are among the highest fiber foods in the human diet. They feed the gut bacteria strains most consistently associated with reduced inflammation and longer lifespan. They stabilize blood sugar more effectively than almost any other food. They provide protein with a metabolic impact radically different from animal sources, slower, cleaner, with none of the inflammatory byproducts that heavy meat consumption produces over time. Noah was eating them not because he understood any of this. He was eating them because he had nothing else. Now look at the grain. What Noah stored was not what you put in your body when you eat modern bread. It was whole, stone-ground grain, the complete kernel with the bran, germ, and endosperm intact. That fiber-dense outer layer that industrial milling strips away is exactly what slows digestion, feeds the microbiome, and prevents the blood sugar spikes that drive metabolic disease over decades. Ancient grain was often fermented before baking, which broke down compounds called anti-nutrients and made the minerals inside dramatically more bioavailable. What Noah had on that ark was functionally closer to a slow-fermented sourdough made from heritage grain than anything you can buy at a grocery store today. And there's something else: the dried fruits and nuts. Dates, figs, raisins, walnuts, almonds. Dense in natural sugars, but simultaneously loaded with fiber, potassium, magnesium, and polyphenols. Polyphenols are plant compounds that researchers have been studying intensively for the past 2 decades. Consistently associated with reduced oxidative stress, lower systemic inflammation, improved gut microbiome diversity, and measurably slower cellular aging. You find them in high concentrations in dried fruits, nuts, and seeds, exactly the foods that would have made up a significant portion of Noah's daily calories. He wasn't eating figs because he understood cellular aging. He was eating figs because they were one of the only things on the ark that kept without refrigeration. This is the part that should stop you. The dietary pattern that modern nutritional science keeps returning to as most protective for human longevity, the pattern that appears in blue zone populations, in Harvard cohort studies, in gut microbiome research, is almost structurally identical to what a man thousands of years ago was forced into by necessity on a boat. That's not a coincidence you can just walk past. If you're finding this as interesting as I am, hit subscribe. Every week, we go deep into what ancient habits and biblical history can actually teach us about how to live and eat today. Now, here's the part I promised you at the beginning. The most striking thing about Noah's story isn't what he ate on the ark. It's what happened the moment he stepped off. Before the flood, the biblical record shows something most modern readers skim past. Human lifespans were extraordinary. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912. Methuselah, 969 years. The longest recorded human lifespan in any historical document from any civilization on Earth. And this isn't one outlier. It's a multi-generational pattern of extreme longevity, consistent across the entire pre-flood genealogy. What were those people eating? Genesis 1:29 is explicit. I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Pre-flood humans were eating what Noah ate on the ark: plants, grains, fruits, nuts, seeds. The original diet was plant-based. Now, watch what changes immediately after the flood. Genesis 9:3. God expands what is permitted. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. For the first time in the biblical record, meat is on the table. And then, watch what happens to lifespans, generation by generation. Noah himself, 950 years. His son Shem, 600. Shem's son Arphaxad, 438. Shelah, 433. By the time you reach Abraham, 4 generations post-flood, the lifespan is 175 years. By Moses, 120. By the Psalms, the expected human lifespan is described as 70. From 950 to 70, in roughly 4 generations. I want to be direct here. This is not a simple argument. Theologians debate these numbers. Scientists point to atmospheric changes, genetic bottleneck effects after the flood, and other variables. This video is not making a single cause claim, but the direction of the pattern is unmistakable. And it is the same direction that appears in every major modern study of dietary patterns and longevity. The further a population moves from whole plant foods toward processed food and heavy animal protein, the worse the health outcomes become across every measurable category. We didn't discover this, we rediscovered it. Noah did not design the optimal human diet. He was handed it by circumstance, floating on water with a year's worth of stored provisions and no other option. And it turns out the diet he was forced into is structurally identical to what the longest-lived humans in the biblical record had been eating all along. So, what do you do with this? 3 things. Simple ones. Make legumes a daily non-negotiable. Not occasional. Daily. Every longevity study, every blue zone, and the pre-flood biblical record all point to the same food. Lentils, chickpeas, black beans, fava beans, in whatever form you'll actually eat them. If Noah sustained himself on them for months with no alternative, your body can handle them every day. Stop treating dried fruits and nuts like a luxury snack. Dates, figs, walnuts, almonds were staple calories for most of human history. They are some of the most nutrient-dense foods humans have ever eaten. They are now sold in tiny packages at premium prices as specialty items. Noah would find a modern grocery store deeply confusing. Stop fighting with whole grains and start fighting with what we did to them. The problem was never grain. It was what industrialization did to grain. Stripping the fiber, removing the germ, eliminating the fermentation. Whole, minimally processed grain was a cornerstone of human nutrition for thousands of years. The version sitting on most shelves today is barely recognizable as the same food. Noah didn't know any of this. He was just trying to feed his family through the worst catastrophe in human history with whatever he had loaded onto a boat. And in doing that, he ended up eating in a way that modern science is still trying to convince us to return to. Maybe that says something about the diet. Or maybe it says something about how far we've drifted from the way we were supposed to eat in the first place.